Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round one prop preview for this week's PGA Championship. Gonna go through what to expect from the Valhalla Golf Club, and then afterwards, some props over there on Underdog and Prize Picks that you can go after for some of your exposure out here on Thursday. So let's start off with the golf course, which we haven't seen since 2014, so not a lot of recent data to work with. We've also had a few renovations, a few changes to the golf course since we've last played there. Gonna be a little bit longer than what we had back there in 2014, and also going to maybe play a little bit easier with some of the impending weather. But before we talk about the weather, how to impact Thursday's play, let's take a look at some of the stats out there from 2014. So first off, the first two rounds played a little bit harder than what you saw on the weekend, and that was because of a little bit of a storm that came in towards the end of round two and also a little bit in between rounds 2 and 3. What we got was a big rainstorm that softened up this course, and then you can see by the weekend it played slightly under par. Round 3, an entire 1.4 shots under, and then with a little bit of wind on Sunday, it only played about 0.5 shots under par. But that is drastically easier, right, than what we saw for the first 2 days, which was a pretty difficult golf course when it was playing firm and fast. Now, if we take a look at the averages from that year, the scoring average was 0.57 over. If you do it for the first 4 rounds, birdie average was 3.3 per round, your bogey average 3.47. Fairways at 9.18, which is actually pretty high compared to other courses out there, but greens and regulation were pretty hard to come from at 10.91. Now, the reason I mentioned the conditions in 2014 is we're going to get a little bit of a different setup. So they got a lot of rain yesterday, in fact, over half an inch of rain at the golf course out there on Tuesday, and though Wednesday has been a little bit drier, they are expected to get a little bit of precipitation sometime in the afternoon, which means that this golf course is going to play a lot more like we saw on the weekend back there in 2014, as opposed to the drier version in days 1 and 2. So while the cut line won't be made, a lot of those PGA Tour professionals, right, guys that are like a John Daly in the field, Richard Beam, for example, that won 20, 30 years ago in some cases, aren't going to be extremely live out there, right? They'll bring the scoring average up. But the better, more competitive players, your PGA Tour players, LIV players, etc., right, DP World Tour guys, are probably going to play to an under par scoring average. So I would expect conditions to be pretty solid out there. And compared to where they have the pricing on some of the sites out there, I think that there's some favorable pricing that we can take advantage of. So there's a little bit of an unknown because it's been a whole 10 years since we've been there. Equipment has changed. The golf ball has changed in that 10-year period. The golf course itself has become a lot longer. So we'll have to see how that affects all the scoring averages, but I think they're going to improve from what we saw based in 2014, and especially for the Thursday round, which is, of course, what we're focusing on here. So the scoring average, I think it'll be even par, maybe slightly better than that. Their birdie average somewhere between 3.5, maybe even 4 per round. I think that significantly improves with the softer conditions. Your bogey average might stay in that 3.5 range, right? Might get a little bit better because of the softer conditions, but where I think you see the massive effect, right, the bigger effect out there is going to be with these birdie or better lines. So you'll see, right, we're going to target a birdie or better prop out here in our exposure. Your fairways hit probably going to be pretty high as well, right? With the softer conditions, you have to imagine that they're going to be holding these fairways, so I don't think that'll change that much, but your green average is going to go up significantly, right? Without firm and fast greens, without those bouncy greens that you get at a lot of majors, you're probably going to see them hit close to 12 per round out there for the first day of action. So I think that these stats can be a little bit of a guideline of what to expect, but with that rain that they're getting in, with next to no wind out there on Thursday, I think it's going to be ripe for the taking. So you can see the sustained winds are 9 miles an hour or lower for the entire day. In fact, in the morning, right, they don't get higher than 5 miles an hour. Your wind gusts are pretty much non-existent too. You can see for a little bit in the late afternoon, it gets up there to like 9 to 11 miles an hour, but that is pretty much non-existent, right? That is close to ideal conditions, or at least as close as we're going to get out there in this part of the country. And with the softer greens, pretty mild temperatures, regardless if you're in the morning or the afternoon, I think we do see an under par scoring average. So, or at very least, very close to even par. So that should give you an idea of how to attack some of these boards. And with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about some of our top plays. So first off, we'll start with Underdog, and we're going to start with an over on fairways. So they've got Corey Connors out here at 8.5 fairways, who is one of the top 25 players on tour this year when it comes to hitting fairways in terms of his driving accuracy, and historically is even better than than that. He's had years where he's been top 5 in the category. He's had a lot of years where he's also been top 10 in that driving accuracy. So at a golf course that in 2014 had over a 9 fairway hit average, a player like Corey Connors, who's top 20 in this field, if not better than that most years out there in the PGA Tour, is going to project significantly better than that 9 fairway mark. In fact, in my projections, I've got him at close to 10 fairways per round. So for him to be at 8.5, that's pretty much a 1.5 fairway discrepancy, but at the very least is an entire fairway discrepancy. If you try to find comps from over here on the Caesars board, of course, guys, Prize Picks doesn't have up fairways quite yet. I think they will at some point this evening, probably post green, fairway props, all of that kind of stuff, maybe even bogey or worse props over there on that side. But over here in Caesars, we do have those to compare to. So you can see they have guys like Colin Morikawa, an elite tier driver, at 10.5. You can see they even have guys like Victor Hovland, who are just above average drivers, out there at 9.5. I think a really good comp would be Xander Schauffele, who's an above average driver himself, right? They have over here at 9.5 fairways. So at this 8.5 number in Underdog, I think there's quite a bit of value. And all he has to do is go out there and have an average day with the driving accuracy, and that would be 9 fairways per round, right? And that would be over this kind of projection. So I think there's quite a bit of value there. I think on books, and Underdog doesn't have up, like, I would say fairways props as high as they should, but over there on Caesars, right, you can see a lot of guys at 9.5, 10. I think Prize Picks, when they post their board, are going to have a lot of guys at 9.5, 10 fairways. So I think there's quite a bit of value to be had on Underdog right now. After that, we've got this under on Brian Harman. So I do think the birdie average is going to be between like 3.5, maybe close to 4 per round, but somebody like Brian Harman is not an elite tier birdie maker. So we're getting a 1.1x multiplier here on the under, and if you take a look at the odds on some of these prop sites, it is an absolute steal. So if we go over here, go to Pars Birdies, they actually have up birdie props. If you scroll to the bottom down here, actually something I just recently found over here, and you can see they have Brian Harman at minus 155 towards the under, right? So the side that this is favoring, right, if we're just looking at the sportsbook odds, would be the minus 155 on the underside. So you'd think, if anything, right, over here in Underdog, this would be the 0.9x multiplier, right? The side that's favored over there on this site, but they have it flipped, right? They have the over as the 0.9x, the under as the 1.1x. So when we're getting that juice on the sportsbook, we're also getting a little payout boost, and we can anti-correlate these props to get even further of a payout. You can see this would pay out a 3.3x multiplier. So it's a pretty good combination. I entered a different combination. I had different props that I was entering together. A lot of bumps that have already happened on this fairway board, so don't be surprised if Corey Connors moves to 9 rather quickly. But if you can catch up before that bump, there's a ton of value there. And of course, with this 1.1x multiplier, which might go away, right, as action comes in on this. So that's why, first off, it's best to be on my Patreon page, where I post these before I post any of it over there on my free content, and to try and catch things before the bumps. So if you're watching this live, I wouldn't wait around too long to go out there and try and lock this in, because there's a good chance this moves to 9, and there's a good chance that that multiplier goes away, especially with some of the sportsbook odds. In terms of what we're going to do on Prize Picks, we're going to do one slip per site. Of course, I'm getting a lot more exposure myself, so that is posted over there on the Patreon. But let's start with this under on Xander Schauffele strokes. So a lot of these prop sites, a lot of these sports books have props up this week. Speaking of, they have total birdies up for a lot of guys over here at Draftkings. I don't think they have a Brian Harman prop up. In fact, let me just scour it. Yeah, no Brian Harman prop over here on Draftkings, but they have a lot of round scores that we can look at. So the prop we want to look at here is Xander. So they have Xander at 69.5 strokes. He is juiced a little bit over, right? Minus 140 for the over. He's plus 110 for the under, but we also have that 0.5 discrepancy there. So, if I think the conditions are going to be easier than what people think, it makes me slightly nervous about Brian Harman. The one thing I'll say, though, is a soft golf course really favors the power players, right? When you can hit it and it'll stick, right? It's easier to hit fairways, so it's easier to go out there and just bomb away with the driver, but it makes the golf course play longer too, right? Without that rollout, without the extra 15, 20 yards, a player like Harman that doesn't carry it 310 yards is going to be at a slight disadvantage. So the soft conditions make me a little bit worried about this kind of prop, but his length is the reason why I'll still get to that fade. On the flip side, I think there's a lot of value on bombers to go out there and take advantage of these conditions. So on the flip side, a Xander, a Max Homa that we'll talk up, can carry the ball like 310, 315 yards, which is going to be important on a long and soft golf course. The soft conditions will mean that you can hit irons close. So really the only way that Brian Harman is going to get to a 4 birdie mark is if he goes out there and hits absolute darts with his long irons, right? Which is possible. You're going to have guys that do that out there, right? So that's why I'm maybe slightly nervous about that prop, but I'll take the minus 155 juice, right? I'll look past that. But these guys over here in Prize Picks, it makes me really excited to take them for some overs on birdies and some unders on strokes. So with that 0.5 discrepancy, right, there's not that much value there. But in reality, I think somebody like Xander projects much closer to 69 strokes, if not closer to 68.5 if we get the easier conditions. If it plays half a stroke under par, which I think is realistic, right? Especially if we look back at some of the 2014 averages. You know, a player like Xander, he projects for at least a shot gain to the field, if not a stroke and a half, 2 strokes gain to the field. If it plays a half a stroke under par, that puts him down there at 68 strokes, right? Puts him there at like 3 under. If you're going out there giving him that full 2 shots to the field, 2.5 shots, I think is even realistic for somebody like Xander. But to shoot a 69, right, to go out there, shoot 2 under, he's essentially going to have to gain just over a stroke to the field, which is something that he does regularly out there on the PGA Tour. So with that push equity at -1, right, you have to incorporate that as well, right? If he goes out there, just gains like half a stroke to the field, that would be him pushing there at 70 strokes, right? Normally, the push line is his actual projection, right? Which I think is at least a shot better than where they have it over here in Prize Picks. On Underdog, he's at 69.5, right? So that's why I'm choosing to take him over here in Prize Picks. And in general, the board on Underdog's a little bit more optimistic. They have guys lower for strokes, higher for birdies than what we have over here in Prize Picks. So I think the site to really take advantage of. I think the fairway lines were great over here. That's actually most of my exposure over there in Underdog. But on the Prize Picks side, I think there's a lot more value for some of your more traditional props, right? So whether it's birdie better overs, unders on strokes, I think a lot makes sense there. Let's take a look at this birdie line. So over here on Draftkings, where they do have these birdie lines, they do have a Max Homa prop up, or at least if they don't, we have that over there on the other sites. Let's see. I don't see any Max Homa here. So I thought they had one up before, but if we go over here to Caesars, where they do have a Max Homa prop up, you'll see that he's juiced towards the over. So he's got -145 juice. If you take a look at FanDuel, they also have birdie props up, and I believe he's -140 juice towards the over. So you're getting some inherent value there. He also has a morning tee time, which is going to be when the conditions are almost perfect with mild temperatures, low winds, receptive greens because of the rain the day before, is I think going to make it perfect for the taking. So Max Homa, a player that is a well above average player when it comes to making birdies, right? Typically a top 30 player on tour, is a player that I would at least have for half a birdie higher than the field, if not closer to an entire birdie higher than the field. And if I think the birdie average might be 3.5 to 5, right? I think it's going to be significantly better than what we had there in 2014. Then somebody like Max Homa might even be at a 4.5 projection, right, when we get there to round 2. So we'll have to see how this course plays. I think a little bit more conservatively, I project him for just over 4 birdies, right, as opposed to that entire 4.5 mark. But depending on how easy the conditions are, right, it very well could be a 4.5 projection that we have Max Homa at. So I like the over regardless. -145 juice is something that I'll lock in, right? Just kind of like the under on Brian Harman. A lot of that is just trusting the sportsbook odds, right? I'll go out there, I'll do my modeling, I'll do my projections. They're helpful, but when those align with what we have on the sports books is where you can really find value out there. So obviously the Max Homa one has juice, but even this 0.5 discrepancy with Xander, right, that's a 0.5 discrepancy. That counts for something. And then on top of that, you're getting one of the best players when it comes to the recent form. So the stats lining up with each player, of course, the sportsbook sentiment also backing that up. And it's the same thing we have over here, right? We don't have a direct comp for Corey Connors because he doesn't have a fairway line over here in Caesars. But based on where they have the rest of the pricing, right, he'd be at least 9.5, probably just over at 9.5 too, if not at 10.5 fairways like they have Sepp Straka, some of the elite tier players at. So if there's any advice I could give you, right, is try and find that blend of both projection and sportsbook value, because those are some of the most valuable props that you can take. And just to remind you, right, there's pretty much a -122 implied odds with most of these props. In fact, on 2-3-mans, it's actually a little bit even higher juice than that, right? Closer to like -130 juice that you're eating on these props, right? You want to find value. And in fact, if you want to be profitable long-term, you have to find mega pieces of value because you're having to overcome that 22 to 30% edge. So just keep that in mind when you're going out there building slips, right? Be very picky about what you're entering. And while it might be super tempting, right, to go like, oh, Rory over 4.5 birdies. Oh, it's got a 1.1x multiplier. Let's go with that. You take a look at the odds over here on the sites, it's not as much value as you'd expect, right? So just to give you a little bit of perspective on Rory, let's see where they have him. They have him at 4.5 birdies, and he's juiced minus 140 under, right? So that's why they have that 1.1x multiplier on the over, and why you might want to at least try and find a better prop for Rory. Like maybe the strokes is a better spot. Maybe you go down here, take like an over on fairways or something. Just make sure that you do your line shopping. Like just for example, right, he's at 8 fairways over here. In terms of fairways are better over here in Caesars, I'm almost certain that they have him at 9.5. Like if anything, right, if you want to support Rory for round 1, just do it the smart way, right? Go over there and maybe take an over on fairways. So just to give you an idea, yeah, he's at 9.5. He is juiced, pretty severely under, but he's at 9.5, right? If anything, you bump him down to 9. If you want to just bump him down a little bit more to be conservative, right, put him at an 8.5 projection, that's still over 8, right? You still have that push equity at 8 in your back pocket. So maybe that's a better way to go about it. So if you want to see all my exposure, go ahead, check out the Patreon page. That's where I have all my props, all the slips that I'm entering posted. And let's go ahead and run this back for round 1, right? Try and cash out on some of these slips. Go out there, keep it rolling for rounds 2 through 4. For all my analysis, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Smash that like button too. And for a free chance to earn a month of my Patreon page, right, where I'm posting all those props, give me your top prop on the board. So whether it's on Prize Picks, whether it's on Underdog, let me know the site. And let me know which prop you're taking, which side that you're leaning on, and just give me a little reason why, right? I'm not asking for a thesis on why you're taking these props, but for a chance to earn that free month, just give me an idea of what you're thinking there. So if you go down there, you give me a good prop down there, it hits, you'll be entered into the giveaway. And out of the props that go down there and hit out of chat, I'm going to give away 1 free month on my Patreon. So go ahead, give me your thoughts down below if you guys haven't already. Best luck with all those lineups, all those slips that you're going with. Patreon link is down in the description of the video if you just want to hop in now. Don't want to wait for the giveaway, but make sure you enter that, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys for the content for rounds 2 through 4.